What's up, traders? Matt from the Trade Brigade here with your weekend crypto report, where as always, I do a technical analysis and give you my thoughts on the coins listed up above, with the guest appearance once again coming from Hex. We did cover it in last week's video, and it will be checking in once again today. So jumping right into the Bitcoin daily chart to start here, I want to at least address what's going on in China with the news there, and then we'll talk technicals in just a second. So obviously, across crypto as an entire space, right, we are feeling that pain here. Most things down about 5% or more, with the exception only of about Cardano there. But the blocking of crypto transactions in China, it's a huge deal, right? But what I think is important to remember is that when there's a will, there's a way, right? There have been other regulations that have come out of China in the past, and there's always been some sort of workaround. And again, I'm not advocating for illegal practices, but what I am saying is that if people truly want to be involved in crypto, they will find a way, whether or not it's a different broker, routing orders through a VPN. I don't know how, or the different methods that they'll use. But again, I do think that if people truly want to still be involved, they'll find a way to do it regardless of what the government says. So those are my 2 cents there. In terms of what's going on from the technical perspective, though, this is where things get a little bit more actionable, right? What can we actually do with this large breakdown? So the first thing to note is, where did this end in terms of the Bitcoin daily chart, right? We had this prior range. We've discussed it for how many weeks now? And where did we bottom out? Right at the top end of the range at $41,150. So that to me is substantial, right? We did come into it and are respecting it as support. And as long as we remain above, that's still forward and upward progress across Bitcoin, and I would argue for crypto as a whole. So let's drill down now to the 4-hour time frame chart, see if we can find any more nuance here and talk about the potential trades that are available. The first thing to point out is that we clearly have an H pattern, right? And H patterns resolve one of 2 ways. Essentially, it's either going to break it here on that secondary test of the H, or if it starts bouncing, usually we go to the H high, and then what does that give us, right? That technically is going to give us some sort of double bottom, right? And then you have a trade up and over the neckline to get you into the next overhead area of resistance. It just so happens to be the top of this bear flag, right, from back here. Remember, we discussed that in the past as well. That's at 47,500, give or take. But before we get ahead of ourselves here, a lot of work has to be done, right? If we take out the resistance trend line, do something like this, what you'll notice is that's obviously going to stand in the way. We also have the neckline resistance area right around that 45,000 mark. So overwhelmingly, I do think that there is potential for this, and then reevaluate. So the target should be here, right around that 45,000-ish mark. Then we'll either monitor for continuation for the double bottom neckline breakout, and in which case, again, we're looking at that 47,500, and then walk them up from there, or we'll get a little bit of rollover off of that area, right? So that's how I think Bitcoin does pan out over the upcoming future here. If we do break down under the line in the sand, which again, I'm not really seeing as the highest probability thing to pan out, but underneath that 41,150, if we scrunch the chart up, what you'll notice is the next area underneath as support is the higher low pullback before the large breakout here, and that's at 38,165. Another reason I don't necessarily think that that is going to be the case is because, look, we already did puncture it here. We technically set this low, and already on the second post of the H, right, we have a higher low. So I do think that this resolves to the upside, but you have the levels to be watching out for here inside of Bitcoin. Next up, we have Litecoin. So checking in on the daily. So daily chart first, then we'll talk nuance on the 4-hour. Coming in for this one, we know that it's been relatively weak for quite some time, seeing this fake breakout in the past. And now we're kind of trading right near the midpoint of the range. And again, from a daily perspective, this is not really the place to initiate a new trade. Now, don't get me wrong, for a lower time frame, sure. But from the daily perspective, it's really waiting to see if we can get a breakout here or reversion to the mean, right? That's always a possibility as well. And the same down here, reversion to the mean or a breakdown. You always have opportunity at the edges, not so much in the middle. So not much to glean here from the daily chart. So let's drill down to the 4-hour and just see what's going on here. Obviously, we have that very similar structure, the H pattern, but what you'll notice is different, right, is that this low is higher and this low is actually lower. So it's not the best in terms of the two, right? I would obviously go with Bitcoin 9 out of 10 times on this type of setup here, but if we do see the bounce, right, if this does retrace up into here, where does that put our resistance trend line? If we come in from the highs, do something like this, what you'll notice is that this is actually going to come in early, right? So maybe there's potential for this, and then be careful, right? Because this could either roll over, noting that it's been relatively weak to Bitcoin and the crypto market, right? or it moves higher and then we roll over at this, right? So Litecoin is going to be a little bit more difficult of a trade to pull off here, noting where the resistance trend line is in comparison to the potential neckline of the double bottom. So to me, just not the cleanest trade. And even so, like, what's the target, right? The bottom end of this range here, that's only up there at 171. This is not the biggest range to be trading, especially if your stop is going under here as you know, the place to put it. So to me, Litecoin, not so obvious of a trade here. I'd go with Bitcoin 9 times out of 10. Underneath, if we do get a breakdown of the H, because again, note that it is relatively weak, then our next target underneath is at 134, okay? So moving on and heading on over to Ethereum, back over to the daily time frame chart, setting this to auto so we can see what's going on here. Let's just note that this is the range, the equivalent of that Bitcoin range, and what you'll see is that, sure, we're kind of trading right around the top end, but look at what's already happened here. We did get some price acceptance back inside of the range, so that to me, again, is signaling a little bit of relative weakness compared to Bitcoin. Now, don't get me wrong, not nearly as much as the Litecoin chart, but overwhelmingly, you know, it shouldn't have really come in this far into this prior range. So that's the first thing to note here from the daily. Let's drill down to the 4 hour now, talk a little bit more nuance. Let's get that resistance trend line on here as we know, because most of these crypto charts have it. So something like that, what you'll notice is that, of course, this is still a little ways overhead and not going to be coinciding with the top of the H so much. In terms of this H, right, what are we seeing from this? Well, unlike what we saw in Litecoin and more like what we saw in Bitcoin, we already have the higher low and we're already starting to retrace some of this move right here. So I would say, you know, the likely scenario, in my opinion, would be a move to here, which is basically 31, let's call it 31.95, right, from round numbers sake, and the resistance trend line. Just like in Bitcoin, be watching to see what happens there. Maybe we get a higher low pullback and then a breakout to take you into 33.45, and then, you know, after that, that shifts the tone, right? We would be breaking the dominant resistance trend line, and from there, we could make more forward and upward progress, looking at 36.29, so on and so forth, to the upside. Now, that's quite a bit of speculation into the future here, but that's how I'm seeing this as a potential to unfold. To the downside, obviously, the line in the sand, very equivalent to that Bitcoin 41K-ish mark, we have 27.11, right? And underneath that, if it does happen to break down, what's the next major target here? Well, let's find one together. I would say it's the higher low pullback zone from right in here, kind of down there towards that 2,500. Yeah, I would probably argue it's 2,500. Nice psychological number. If you want to be exact and note where this level is, it's technically a little lower at 24.64, okay? Cardano is up next, and what do we have here from the daily? So zooming it back out, then we'll drill down to the 4 hour as we do. What you'll notice here, right, this one has been the it's shown the most relative strength. There we go, searching for words here. So remember that this is your range, obviously massive breakout to the upside, and it held it to the tick on this pullback here with the China news. So that to me is incredibly strong, just as strong as Bitcoin, if not stronger, noting that this obviously made a new higher high here, a new all-time high before pulling back. So to me, Cardano, relative strength king inside of the crypto space. But what is kind of interesting about how this move is unfolding is look at the upper wicks and lower wicks on today's candle, just a huge amount of volatility out there. Let's drill down to the 4 hour, see if we can make a little bit more sense of this chart here, and not really, right? So this one does not have the H pattern here, and it's really trying to resolve into this kind of sloppy-ish 4 hour bull flag, right? So if we can get a breakout up and over, I would say it just has to be this level right here at this 2.349. Then your next target, walk it up, is at 2.594, so on and so forth up here. Now that's asking a little bit much, but if Bitcoin can seriously catch a bounce here, and maybe Ethereum as well, then that's going to help power Cardano up and higher. I already know some people who are, you know, buying the dip here inside of Cardano, so you get that whole crowd as well. And again, technically they're not making the wrong choice, noting that if I can get it here on the 4 hour, that we respected the top end of the range to the tick, essentially. Look at how close this came. Perfect lower wick off of it, now getting price acceptance higher. So I would watch out for the trade higher here inside of Cardano. Excuse me, only really getting interested up and over that 2.349. Not so interested to the downside, just simply based on the nature of this candle here. I mean, look at the range there. It just doesn't seem abundantly clear to me that if there's a breakdown, we're either going here or here. I just don't like it to the downside here as the chart currently sits. sits. So that's all for Cardano. Doge is up next, the infamous coin for the people, and obviously this one has never gotten out of its own way to begin with. This is kind of the equivalent of that Bitcoin daily range, all these daily ranges we've been discussing, and obviously if you just split this in half, we're clearly in the lower half, but if you even take it one step further, right, you can split it into thirds, and whenever you split it into thirds, you're basically looking at, okay, if we're in the upper third, bullish, middle third, neutral, lower third, bearish, right, and that's clearly where we're trading as of right now. So Dogecoin, just obviously we know it's kind of just the trade, it's that, you know, sort of joke out there in the crypto space. It's just not showing the relative strength that it needs to really be attractive to any sort of person who wants a long-term investment in Doge. So that's all from the daily. If we drill down to the 4 hour now, just to get a little bit more nuanced here, you can see that we do have some sort of H. I wouldn't really call this a clean H, right? Because clearly that's, you know, this kind of throws a wrench in that whole pattern here. This strikes me as price acceptance lower, right? And this strikes me as a double top, broke the neckline, and a move lower here. So it's all going to be about whether or not we can we get more continuation underneath this bottom end right here around that 0.2010, or if we can accept back above that 0.2192. Okay, so to me, Doge is a do not touch in this zone right here as it chops back and forth. You're either waiting for a long up to this or waiting for a breakdown under here to get into that 0.1846, which is just off the screen from in here. Let me scrunch this up so you can actually see where that's coming from. Noting that, oops, from the daily, this would probably be a little bit more visible. We have in here just a general area of support. Let's actually, I don't know, maybe, yeah, maybe it's that, okay? I would go with that, 1930, okay? So I like that a little bit better. I think the daily might have been a little deceiving there. In terms of a resistance trend line, what are we seeing from that perspective? Well, if we come in from here, do something like this, obviously we're kind of chopping through that one here. So let's go ahead and get rid of that and try again from this high to this high. And again, just really not seeing the trade available here inside of Dogecoin. Looks rather sloppy to me, in my opinion. Just, again, probably an avoid for me. If you want to trade it, you have some levels and you have some thoughts. Next up, we have Ripple, and this is one of those. Let's go back to the daily, right? This is the one that was relatively strong, and now it's exhibiting some relative weakness, right? Remembering that this was the overall range, and we were consolidating above. Now we're getting price acceptance back inside. So again, that's not going to bode too well for the price of Ripple here in terms of forward and upward progress, as we've discussed with that Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Cardano chart. So that's something to note here. Let's drill down to the 4 hour now and talk a little bit more nuance. For this one, again, your resistance trend line isn't so clear. If we do something like this, that's obviously broken. We're trying to resolve it now. So maybe it's this. I wouldn't be overly confident in that as a resistance trend line. What I would do, though, let's clean that up. Oops, that's not what we want. We want the delete button. There we go. And what I would rather watch is simply the high of the bounce, right? It's going to boil down to we either make it here or we don't. If we do make it, then you're looking for the breakout probably to here, the top end of this range, and that would take us back outside of that daily sort of area that we discussed as the relative strength sort of gauge, right? So to me, it's all about 1, the nice round number, and if we can get above it, can we make it into this period of prior consolidation around 1.1385 to show some relative strength? Underneath some of these lows, let's go ahead and map out some areas of support. Firstly, we're going to have this 0.8804, and then zooming back out to the daily to look for that next support. It's really coming in from down here at the 0.7931. That's what I would watch out for to the downside if we see continued breakdown. But again, based on the 4 hour, I would really wait to see, can we resolve this to the upside? If the rest of crypto sees a bounce, I definitely think that Ripple, being one of those ones that was relatively strong, could see that move up and out of and into this prior area of consolidation. Next up, we'll take a look, and lastly at Stellar, then we'll check in on Hex to wrap up the video. This one, if we go back out to the daily and talk about relative strength, relative weakness, this one, as we know, just still in the lower third, right? If we do the same as what we did with Doge, something like this, what you'll notice is we're in the lower third, which of course is more bearish than bullish. So drilling down into the 4 hour now to talk a little bit more nuance here. This pattern doesn't strike me as, too tradable. Honestly, just coming back into this consolidation range here strikes me as, choppy, right? So I would really wait to see this one either resolve higher. So, that would be price acceptance back above 0.2973 or lower underneath the lows from this pattern right in here. So that's really down there at 0.2689. And underneath that, we're looking at the quarter mark as the next major area of support from underneath. Let me go back out to the daily so you can see that here, and that's just simply coming from right around here, right? You can see all those touches from in the past, this general area of consolidation. That would be the downside target. So Stellar, not really seeing it either. So really, if you get anything out of today's video, it's kind of focus in on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Cardano. After that, a lot of things are not looking so clear, not looking so hot. Let's wrap up the video now with a quick look at Hex, and Hex USDT is the one that we want. And what I wanted to point out here was, remember the rules of Hex, right? You need to tell people how long you plan on holding it for, and you need to stick to that. Otherwise, you become penalized for bailing early. And notice how the China news impacted Hex, right? Much more strong than almost anything that we've looked at so far. Look at this price consolidation here, price acceptance. Never really, it did drop. Don't get me wrong. There was some selling that happened, but immediately rebounded and got back into this area of consolidation, which is just well above any of this other, the uptrend here is just alarmingly strong. So to me, Hex is still the clear play over Xenon Pay, which we covered. If we go on over to that, again, the charts are not available on TradingView yet. You can clearly see that this one has fallen apart a little bit, right? We were talking about it back in here. Clearly it has moved lower high from in here, and now is just dribbling lower in here. So I would go with Hex as the better alternative to the two. And again, just zoom out, give yourself the perspective of the daily uptrend, and make your decision based on that. So that's going to wrap up the video. If you enjoyed it or learned anything new, definitely let me know down below in the comments section or by giving the video a thumbs up. Don't forget the weekly watch list comes out on Sunday, and I wish you all a green trading week.